Okay, we're going to get started then. Um, Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Allison Manley, the Director of Marketing here at Canopy Studios, and I am joined by my colleague, Kim Lai, who is one of our amazing designers. She's here to talk about how your website's user experience impacts the perception of a brand. As many of you know, Canopy designs, builds, and supports websites for clients that want to make a positive impact. That includes all of you at UCSF. Kim is one of our amazing user experience strategists and designers. She helps clients bring their mission and goals to life online. She does spend so much time to understand what makes an organization unique, then creates design solutions that embody those qualities, helping clients tell their stories effectively, build trust with their audience, and motivate action. So I'm sure you're all very familiar with Zoom in these times of quarantine, but remember there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And so at any time during the presentation, if you have a question for Kim, anything that you want clarified, please just enter it there. And when we're done the presentation, we'll address all the questions. The presentation itself is only about 15 minutes, so there will be about 10 minutes left over for questions. So from here, I'm going to turn off my video and audio and turn it over to Kim.
Thanks, Allison. Hi, everyone.
Hold on. Can we just get verification from people that they can see the screen? I just want to make sure. Can someone just write in the chat that they can see it? Okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you. All right, go on, Kim. Sorry.
All right. Hi, I'm Kim. I'm one of the user experience strategists and designers at Canopy. I got my master's in new web design and new technology from the Academy of Art in San Francisco, and I've been about 8 years professionally working with mission-driven organizations. So this is the third, I guess, in the series of the summer series, and what we're going to go over today is defining what user experience is and the kinds of questions it should be answering. How does user experience impact a person's perception of a brand or an organization, what you can do about it now that you're armed with this information, and then leaving the floor open for additional questions. So I guess the big question is, what is user experience? And I feel like because it's such a developing practice, there are a lot of ways in which people are defining what user experience is, but in essence, what it really is how a person is feeling as they're interacting with a site. And it really compiles 3 distinct areas to hopefully form a unified experience of a site. And that is audience needs. What are they looking for? Can they find it? What do they need to do on the site? Your needs, the business goals. What do you want the audience to be doing on your site as they're interacting? What do you want them to learn? And then website best practices, making sure that the experience is consistent from one site to the other. That way people know how to interact with your site. What we're not talking about is any sort of visual design. So we're not talking about colors. We're not talking about fonts. We're not talking about any sort of visual representation of what your brand might be, whether that be photography, illustrations, et cetera, et cetera. We're really aiming to answer 4 very specific questions when we're talking about user experience. And those questions are, can I find it? Can I find what I'm looking for? Do I understand it once I have found it? Is it in a language that I understand? If I have a visual impairment, am I able to understand that content as well? And specifically when we're thinking about videos and audios, for those who may not be able to read as easily as others. Can I use it? Do I know how to interact with it? And this is, in terms of buttons, links, accordions, any other, any way in which a person might need to click or hover or use their finger or mouse in any sort of way to manipulate the content. And do I feel satisfied? Did I come away feeling like I learned what I came here to learn? I was able to do what I needed to do, and I feel good about that interaction. And research actually has some very significant findings around how user experience really affects how people view and how they perceive one organization over another. And I think this is really it is really helpful because we're able to learn and understand the data in order to make our website stand apart from the rest. Because everyone nowadays is online. Almost 60% of the entire world is using the internet in some way to interact with it, with websites, with apps. So it really is, since it's such a large portion of the world is using internet, there's a lot of competition out there, right? We aren't the only ones out there with our specific thing. There needs to be a way in which we stand out, in which we are serving our audience better than other people. And so when we think about that, we really are thinking about 3 metrics, barometers, to gauge whether or not our experience is superior or better than others. And this is the way in which a lot of audiences are gauging websites. The top one really is performance. How long is the page going to load? Especially on mobile devices. If it takes longer than 3 seconds for a page to load, people will get frustrated and will leave immediately. And it is the first barrier to entry really into your site is site performance. Second is information flow. Is your information organized in a way that I, as an end user, am able to navigate it, to find specifically what I need? Can I do that through navigation? Can I do that through the body content? Are there links to learn more information? Things like that to make sure the story feels really cohesive. The next steps are clear. And the third being is your communication style. You know, does your text feel warm and welcoming? Is it written for the widest audience possible in terms of their education? Or if you have a really specialized audience, is the text tailored toward that specialized audience? All of these things to make your audience feel like you know them and that you understand them. So we're going to touch on each of these 3 barometers, starting off with performance. And really the key here is mobile is super, super important. Almost over 65% of all website visits are coming from mobile devices. So being mobile responsive or mobile ready is more important than ever. And we're really seeing kind of the impacts of what a mobile first or mobile responsive design really has on a brand perception when we think about performance and how people view it. So I have a few stats I'm going to run through quickly here. I have a lot of them, but you'll have this slide afterwards to look at it more closely. But research shows us that 52% of users who have a bad mobile experience are less likely to engage with you. And that's a huge percentage. That's over half. So making sure that mobile experience is really important. If it's not even mobile friendly, they might just abandon the site altogether if they're coming to your site first for mobile. So making sure that content is scaled to mobile screen, again, super important. Over 60% will not trust a company that isn't optimized for mobile because it's just seen as the standard nowadays to be mobile friendly. And almost 60% of users will refuse to recommend someone if they have a bad mobile site. If they're out in the world saying, you know, you should buy a t-shirt from company A over company B, they have a better mobile experience. You can actually purchase the shirt right now using your phone. They're more apt to do that. 40% of people who will leave the site, again, if it takes more than 3 seconds to load, and this is especially true with mobile devices where performance issues are more prevalent, making sure that our page load times are to a minimum. And 30% of people will leave a brand that they loved after just one bad experience. Really, the experience that you have in the internet will really shape the way that you will that you like and how you will experience that brand. If it's an in-store brand, maybe you just go in store, you know, but the internet, especially now in this specific time, internet is more important than ever. Being available and accessible online is so very important. But there are some positives when we think about performance. Even if just the smallest amount is invested in user experience, you will see that return on investment multiple times over. You will see an improvement in organic traffic if you have a responsive mobile design, because again, 65% are coming through the mobile devices. You'll see a slight bump in your Google indexing in search results. And majority of people will come back to your site if you have a good mobile experience. They're already coming on their mobile device. If they enjoy the experience they're having on your site, then they're more apt to come back. The second being information flow. Attention is short. People are on go, 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 and they really want the answers that they need as quickly as possible. And research shows us that almost 80% of people who cannot find what they're looking for quickly on your site will go searching somewhere else. They'll just go back to Google search. They'll type in what they think they need, and they will go through Google search that way. So it is really important for us to make sure that the most popular content, or the content that our audience really needs, is something that's easy to navigate in the navigation or is easy to find through a site search. And we see this again with information flow. You know, content that looks well organized, especially on a mobile device, boosts positive feedback from audience members. Or if the website looks messy and it feels hard to navigate, people will just abandon that site. They won't interact with it. They'll just leave. And then a lot of our, first impressions really come from organization. Is it logical? Do I like the design? A lot of these first impressions that you're making on audiences are really coming from this theory of user experience and design. And just in comparing user experience to user interface design, you'll see a higher conversion rate if you have a good user experience rather than if you just have really good design. Really good design will definitely convert people, but good user experience and catering to your audience really trumps any sort of branding or visual design. Content is paramount because we use content to crawl your site for SEO and to elevate pages in any sort of search. Also, it really is the way in which you're communicating to your audience. 75% of all website traffic is run through Google. So being able to write for humans, writing exactly what you know really is going to help you in the long run if you're thinking about sort of an SEO play. So what research has found, and actually this was a surprising one for me, was that a lot of people learn about companies through blogs rather than ads. They're finding you based on the content that you're writing on your site that's served up through a search, rather than paying for ads that show up in a Google search or show up on another site and then clicking through that way. I found that actually very surprising, but it makes sense that the content that you're writing for your audience, and if it's written in a way that feels really accessible and relatable, will be served up and would be more compelling to a new person. This is, I think, is something that a lot of people are tending towards, especially nowadays, is that 73% of people buy through video content. Video content is very compelling. It's really nice just to see a human face or hear a human voice talk to you about a mission or a specific product. And visual data is processed by the brain just so much faster than reading text. And what we know about reading text is I think it's around 60%, I believe is the correct stat, of people who don't actually read text. They skim the page. And that actually might be a very generous, 40% actually read everything, might be very generous. And being really clear about who you are and what you believe is something that is really near and dear to a lot of people who are on the internet. If they don't understand who you are or what you stand for, it's most likely that they won't necessarily trust you and they might leave. Being transparent is really important to people now in these days. So really, it's like, what can we do about this? Knowing this data, like, how is this going to help us? And there's definitely some things that we can do right off the bat to increase our user experience of our website. And the biggest thing, especially for performance, is sizing image appropriately. images are the biggest offender for performance issues. If you have too big of an image uploaded to your site that's showing only in a tiny frame, you need to readjust that, and it will speed up your page load time like nobody's business. But in terms of research, something that we do, especially when we first onboard a client, is go through a fairly significant research phase. And we're looking to do two things. We're looking to gather quantitative data. We really want to understand where the majority of your audience is going, what are they actually doing? And we use two tools for this. We use Google Analytics, which I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and Hotjar. And what Hotjar allows us to do is sort of what you're seeing in this moving video, is it can track where people are clicking, it can track how far down the page they are scrolling. It allows us to conduct on-site surveys to query your audience in real time about the experience that they've had on your site. And it allows us to see through funnels where people are converting. Is it on the home page? Is it 2 pages down? Is it 3 pages down? Are they even converting at all? So it allows us to do a few things that Google Analytics doesn't really provide us out of the gate. Here's a couple of examples of what Hotjar provides us. Here's an example of the click tracking. You can kind of see the heat map element. The hotter, the redder it is, the more people are interacting with that component. So something that really is great about heat map tracking, in my experience, is understanding which contact us button is the most effective. Is it the one in the menu? Is it the one in the footer? Is it the one in the body copy somewhere? It's really great for comparing and contrasting actual buttons or calls to actions. On the right is an example of a conversion funnel. So we have to set these up based on our own assumptions of how someone might move through a site and at what point do they convert. And we can test our assumptions using that tool as well, which is really great. Some of the questions that we're asking ourselves as I'm looking at quantitative data is, how are people finding you? And this is helpful to think about Google Analytics. Is it from social media? Is it from an internet search? Are they just putting your URL directly into their address bar and finding you that way? What's the first page someone lands on? It may not be your home page. So it's good for us to understand what that actual page is and make sure that that page experience is optimized to provide additional pathways to more information. What is your most popular content and what buttons are used most often, as the example with the heat map. The other part is gathering our qualitative data, understanding how your audience feels about your brand today, interpreting what value you're bringing to them and their experience with the website, and letting them tell us how they feel. This is going to be our most valuable information. And we can do this in 2 ways. We do an on-site survey, and it's a really short 5-question survey that's meant to capture the experience they had today on the site. You know, how would they recommend us to other people? What have they tried to do on the site? Did they actually achieve what they wanted to do? And if not, why not? What was that barrier? And then we're able to start understanding where people are getting stuck, or if they're able to achieve what they want to, great, then it's nothing we need to worry about. Another way in which we do this is a long form survey, and we typically use Google for this. And this is something that we send out to current constituents or our current audience base. What we're really trying to understand is why they've chosen this brand over another. What are their needs? What would they improve themselves on the site? Or if there's any other content they'd like to elevate. And a lot of these questions you would see on those surveys. You know, how do you feel about site design? Rating qualities is a really great question. If you have an idea of the kinds of qualities your organization embodies, let's test that with your audience and see what resonates more or less with your audience. And then with that research, we're able to apply those learnings. And I have a couple of examples here. These are some of the more typical adjustments that we would make on a site. And I think the biggest one in a lot of ways we do a lot of is streamlining menu structure. making sure that within just the navigation, you're able to find the piece of content you're looking for. This is an example of the Cutaneous Lymphoma Foundation, where originally the navigation structure felt fairly straightforward, but there was a lot of content hidden under the layers of information within this navigation. So as an audience member, really didn't get a full sight into, or full view into all the content that was available to me. So actually what you see afterwards is a much larger, more verbose menu structure, but it really gives you insight into all of the things that the organization provides me as a patient. Optimizing layouts, you know, using eye tracking best practices. There's a couple of eye tracking shapes that you typically follow when you're thinking about your page structure, the F shape and the Z shape. And those shapes basically are general rules of thumb of understanding how one might read the page, left to right, down, left to right, or left, right, left, right. So taking those, taking that knowledge and applying it to how we are designing and reimagining content for a specific page. Editing content to be really succinct and really catchy and really compelling. Over 60% are just scanning your pages, so headers are really important here because they are the biggest thing that someone will see on the page and will be the first thing that they read. So making sure that your headers really have the value-driven statements in them is something that'll be really important and really compelling to move someone through a page. And then using relatable language, you know, making sure that for the specific audience type, you're writing for that person, because the website may be the first interaction that this person has with your brand. So we really want to make them feel welcome, make them feel like this organization understands and gets me, and that builds trust. If they feel like they're understood, if they feel like you can relate to them, this is a way in which we can start creating that trust with your brand to a wider audience. All right, I think that was 15 minutes.
All right, well, we've got about six minutes left and we've got a whole bunch of questions. So I don't know if you can see these also in the side, Kim, but I will read the first one out loud. What would you say are the top 3 mistakes that people make with user design on their websites and how to avoid them?
Ooh, that's a great question. The first one, I think off the bat, is not being consistent with buttons in our text links. Having too many colors or too many different styles of buttons is something I see quite often. And it's very confusing because I, as an end user, may not understand that this purple button also is a button like this blue button. And if they're different shapes, does that mean something? Being really consistent with things that you want someone to interact with is totally something that is key. You know, making them consistent colors, making them consistent shapes. It's definitely number 1. I would say number 2 is a poor use of headings, poor use of headers, especially for that person who just wants to scan the page. Not using your H1s, H2s, H3s to their fullest potential. You really want to figure out what the prioritization of your content hierarchy is and really use those to their full advantage. And then third, what is the third? This is a good one. Actually, I would say footers. Footers are the third. I feel like footers kind of get a bad rap nowadays because it seems like it's a place where we just dump a lot of our menu links. And in my experience, that's not necessarily helpful because they just see a bunch of links and they get overwhelmed. They don't utilize the footer that often. What I like to do with footers is try to make them really action oriented. So whatever the quick actions, is it making a donation? Is it going to a patient portal? Is it, you know, purchasing a product? Making it really geared towards the things that you want your audience to do. That way it feels a little less overwhelming and they're more apt to use it.
Okay, great. Sarah Joost has a very involved question that, in the interest of time, actually, I would love it if I could just connect the two of you via email
Right.
to answer this one, because it's hard to do in a few minutes. I think it requires more specifics and attention than we can rattle off quickly. So Sarah, I hope that's okay if I can connect you and Kim. Sammy asks a question: what are some typical questions? I think this refers to the survey that you mentioned earlier when you send out a survey. What are typical questions that help you understand new user needs?
Ooh. I mean, the first thing that I always ask on a survey is, you know, what are you most interested in learning on the site? And it really depends. It depends on how I frame the question, depending on the client. Sometimes I might organize that question around types of content, like is it news versus is it campaigns? I'm thinking of a specific client right now. Is it campaigns that they're really interested in? Is it getting up-to-date news on what's happening in a specific campaign? Is it the people who are creating these campaigns and actually actioning out some of the things that they're doing in these campaigns? It's really specific, but I try not to leave the question open-ended, because I find that sometimes open-ended questions people don't answer in a thoughtful way. So I tried to give some prompts or some direction in sort of organizing the answer to that question. I don't know if that's helpful. Another thing that I always ask is, give me 3 to 5 adjectives of how you would describe this organization or this brand. And that really helps us figure out how we're going to write content and what kind of content we're going to elevate. So if they say things like, you're really effective and we really appreciate that you're super transparent, then to me it sounds like that's what your audience really cares about, and we need to make sure that anything that we're writing, or if we're organizing your menu structure, that transparency and that statement of impact is something that's really easy and accessible. I think those are the 2 questions I definitely always ask.
Sorry, great. I couldn't find my unmute button fast enough. Wynn had a question about where can I find best practices? And I happen to know that if Kim scrolls forward on the slideshow, she actually has a very lengthy resource section on here. So we will be sending this out to all of you. There's quite a bit. So which one of these is best for best practices? I'm assuming the one that says.
Yeah, so the best practices, Laws of UX, that site is really great for rule of thumb, for things that you can do to help boost the user experience of your site. I've definitely checked that site out. I refer to it all the time.
Wonderful. Okay. We had one more question from Ann Baker, if we can squeeze it in.
Sure.
What recommendation do you have to make conversion funnel goals that are not price-based, such as for an education service?
Ooh. So I guess it really depends on what is the way in which you would like your audience to convert. Is that signing up for a newsletter? Is that downloading a piece of content in form of PDF? I think we need to define really what do we mean by when we say convert. If it's not purchasing something, what is most important to you as a business that someone should be doing on your site? And then we can kind of work backwards and figure out, okay, how many places do we have that specific ask? And what is our assumption of what someone needs in order to convert? Is that, do they need to learn about you a little bit more? Do we feel like it's something that just happens right away because they're very aware of who you are? And then we can start testing hypotheses that way.
Great. Okay. Well, we are 1 minute over, so I'd like to thank everyone for coming and thank you all for asking such great questions. We will be sending out the recording and the deck of the webinar by the end of the week. As a reminder, of course, Canopy would love to help you with your website. So please email us at hello@canopy.com if you're interested. And I would say that that's a wrap. So thank you so much and have a really wonderful rest of your week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.